se. With our path currently chosen, it was time to get back to questing. And just as I was about to set out for our next quest, we ran into our first rare mob. As I was about to face the legendary beast, I was attacked from behind by a cougar. And yes, I've dealt with plenty of cougars before. That's normally in a bar setting, and that's a story for another time. Now, with this cougar taken care of, it was finally time. And our fight was glorious. A tale for the ages.
The heavens do not fear me because I am a god. They fear me because I am a man.
Welcome to Summoner's Rift.
And when the dust had finally cleared and settled, Mazaranche lay defeated. And somehow it had a brand new cloak of comfort. Where it was hiding? Your guess is as good as mine. Now, after the fight, let's fast forward a little bit, and we're back at Bloodhoof Village, the new class-specific quest awaiting our return. So, after grabbing the quest and all my new skills, it was time to head out. But apparently, my fame had already started spreading across the plains of Mulgore.
Behind me lies a farm. Above the hearth.
Well, that was both uncomfortable and lovely at the same time. Our first quest involved a run-in with the Alliance, and surprise,
Oh, it didn't work.
these evil bastards were trying to ravage these sacred lands for our precious metals and ores. And once the dwarves were dealt with outside, I entered the goblin and human mine. These guys came for Tauren metals, and they got to taste some Tauren metals, alright. I actually ended up snagging my first green item off these guys, and unfortunately, it was an item that I couldn't use. But I was hopeful that it would fetch at least a decent amount of silver off the auction house. And upon leaving the cave, I was immediately ambushed by a pack of cowardly Alliance, and I honestly nearly died, and I probably should have. Thankfully, my Fine Totem came in clutch once again, and on my warrior, I would 1000% have died. Moments like these are why I'm really starting to love the utility of being a shaman. And after turning in the quest, we were officially ready to set out for the Tauren capital city of Thunderbluff. A city so iconic to classic World of Warcraft with its brick walkways and towering cliffs, it has a lifetime full of memories for anyone who's ever been a hordie. After frolicking around the city and gathering the flight path, as well as doing some much-needed character maintenance, I gathered up all the quests for RFC, making sure to also pay my respects to this fallen orc brethren at the base of the flight path. This meant that it was time for us to leave Mulgore behind, and it was time to enter the largest gathering of degenerates since the Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 lobbies. The Barons. Alright, sure, maybe it's full of some, questionable characters, but nothing feels more iconic for leveling a hordie than the Barons. After traveling more through the higher levels, I finally reached the crossroads.
Really?
And the moment I arrived, I had to pause and admire this absolute unit of an old warrior standing proud in front of the inn. I vowed to one day be as cool as him. Only time will tell if that's true. Being this close, I had to take a short break from questing in the Barrens to go and visit the Horde capital of Orgrimmar. There's just something magical about standing before its Orgrimmar gates for the first time as a new character, and walking through Orgrimmar's crowded streets and seeing all of these max-level versions of your class and other classes can be all the motivation that you need to chase those goals that feel impossible when you were first looking at the character screen. While in Orgrimmar, I also stepped into the War Chief's throne room and learned of the Burning Blade cult's dastardly plans. They intended to seize Orgrimmar from within. So with our new mission in hand, off we went to teach these misguided warlocks what true magical power looks like. All while trying to snag one of their insignias along the way. Now this journey would take me over an hour to find these insignias. I eventually teamed up with an orc shaman named Kaboom and a troll mage named Tandai, helping each of them find their insignia in under 10 minutes. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the insignia was ours. This meant it was time for us to head back to Orgrimmar and take on our first dungeon. That's right, my friends. It was time for a little RFC. Now, the group actually came together quickly, and after a nervous walk through the Cleft of Shadow, we had arrived. Now, I'll admit, to save time hunting for a group, I didn't really queue up as a DP. I took advantage shaman and decide to cosplay as a healer. At this point, the only heals I have are just different ranks of healing touch. I don't have any heals over time or any buffs. One heal. So we were gonna have to get crafty and basically just hope for no major pools or accidents. Which literally happened like 30 seconds into the run, when we had an accidental mob pool and me simultaneously running out of mana, resulting in a very close call right off the rip.
Even impaled on a blade, I will press forward.
Literally moments later, my big horn butt pulled another mob, and I literally didn't even notice it until I had already heard the threat meters with a bunch of healing in a row. Needless to say, I didn't survive that one. So this meant if we were playing hardcore, our official journey would have ended right here. And of course, I'm the only class in the dungeon with a res, so this meant a nice little corpse run back. 5 minutes and a few laughs later, we were back and at the location of the first dungeon quest. Now, this quest involved avenging one of our Tauren brothers who was slain by the vicious Trog, Ogleflint. And I don't really consider this guy much of a boss fight, more so probably just a tougher variant of the version of Trogs that we've defeated up until this point. And although his defeat didn't reward us with any loot, the questline after would reward us with a decent pair of bracers and some really good experience, so everything was worth it. And after his defeat, we ended up fighting deeper into the chasm until we reached a Dreadlord whose bark was actually way worse than his bite. I would say he was definitely stronger than Ogleflint, but the only dangerous part of this whole thing was if we accidentally pulled another mob during the fight. After we defeated him, he ended up dropping a nice cape upgrade. And although we were hopeful, we didn't end up winning. I did remember to loot him and grab his heart for the quest. This meant our next challenge was fighting through some more densely packed mobs on the way to the next quest boss, a satyr named Basil. And although this boss was likely the second strongest in the entire dungeon, he literally only dropped 5 linen claws. This meant that with his defeat, we only had one last remaining boss, Jirkosh the Invoker. But we decided to cheese things a little bit and drop down on him like a medieval bandit named Seal to avoid having to fight all those unnecessary mobs. And honestly, within no time, Evil Warlock's reign had come to a violent end. This meant that our first dungeon was completed, and we were to be rewarded with a much-needed upgrade. The legendary Staff of Orgrimmar. With my amazing new weapon in hand, it was finally time to head back and complete the class quest we picked up all those moons ago in Bloodhoof Village. But first, I had to grab my skinning skill increase, trying to stay ahead of the game here and try and line my pockets with an extra little bit of silver. Now, high atop a mountain stood a brazier, home to the spirits of fire. And with my special strong dance, I focused on the where I had to quickly dispatch it and grab a glowing ember. With this new elemental trinket in hand, I had to return back to the Baron, back to Cranel Fists, to earn my very first fire totem. The elementals began to recognize me as a wielder of great power, and one capable of mastering their ways. It was finally time to get back to the Baron quest that I've been putting off this entire time. Along the way, I ran into a mage named Balward, who kindly invited me to his party right before he killed an NPC that actually takes him a ridiculously long time to respond, so I was very thankful. And after thanking him, I went for a swim, wash the stench off my coat, and explore the forgotten pools. After a little bit of enjoying myself in the swimming pools, it was time for some much-needed character maintenance back at Thunderpool. And to my surprise, a day or two later, this poor orc's body is still lying at the base of the flight path. You'd think the guards or somebody would have moved him by now. I mean, he's really starting to stink up the place, and he's scaring the newbies out of here. While there, I also picked up the quest for one of the biggest and longest lasting upgrades we'd probably see for a while. The Crescent Staff, which meant it was time to enter one of my favorite and most memorable dungeons from my early days in WoW. the Wailing Caverns. Now, at level 16, we were definitely a bit early for this dungeon. But it didn't take long to assemble a ragtag group of misfits. I knew better than to try and roll as a healer this time around, especially being level 16. I just knew I wasn't going to be able to keep up with the mobs. And luckily, I was able to do as a DPS. Now, the hardest part of this dungeon isn't really the mobs for me. It's not the boss fights. It's trying to figure out where the hell I am and not missing any of these ridiculous jumps. Now, this run ended up being one of the best dungeon runs I've ever done in regards to loot and drops. We even scored this PoE Prospector Axe, a seriously badass two-hander that had our Orc Warrior grinning from ear to ear. But he wasn't the only one that was getting lucky. I mean, this dungeon dropped multiple upgrades, not just for me, but pretty much everyone in the group, except for this rogue, who somehow managed to get his feelings hurt because I snagged a set of gloves he wanted. There I was, sitting in literal rags, staring at him all decked out in gear that he admitted to sending over from his main, complaining to me. Well, I guess you can't please everyone, I suppose. So regardless, we kept pushing forward, cutting down every member of the Fang. Finally reached Verdan the Everliving, a level 21 elite boss giant who can hit your tank for massive damage if you're not careful. Now, thankfully, we managed to take him down without too much of a hassle. And surprisingly, the group was actually up for tackling the escort quest and taking down the optional Murloc boss, Mutinous the Devourer. During the fight, Scribjelly, the troll mage, actually got a pair of white leather shoulders, and without a single word, immediately traded them to me for nothing. What a true gentleman and a scholar. This meant that we had finally received one of the most iconic upgrades to your armor pieces in World of Warcraft, our first set of shoulders. And then, out of nowhere, out of the murky waters, popped the ugliest creature I've come across. Besides dwarves, Mutinous the Devourer. The fight went on longer than any of the previous boss fights, but eventually, persevered, and we defeated him. He ended up dropping a beastly new blue chest piece upgrade for the same warrior who got the axe earlier, and a nice belt upgrade for the Crying Rogue. That meant that we had completed the dungeon, and with finished the quest that unlocked our brand new weapon. It was time to retire the Staff of Orgrimmar and wield the Crescent Staff.
I will fall at least one more time.
With our new amazing weapon in hand, I figured it was time to run back through the caverns one more time, because it just never feels like you can get enough of the Deviant Hides for the quest in one run-through. This second run-through of Wailing Caverns wasn't nearly as loot-heavy, but it flew by compared to the first. And by the time we finished the second run-through, we were already level 19, halfway to level 20. It was time to temporarily leave Barrens behind us for a while and set our sights on the scary peaks of Stone Mountain. And that, my friends, is the perfect stopping point for our first episode back. I can tell you how hyped I am for the release of Burning Crusade. I've missed you all so much, and it feels amazing to be back in the lands of Azeroth. And hey, while we're back on YouTube, I wanted to let you guys know I'll also be streaming every week over on Twitch, and maybe even dual streaming here on YouTube. I'll put the links down below in the description, so make sure to swing by, drop a follow, and come hang out. And I can't wait to see you all there.
The last episode saw us clearing Wailing Caverns and walking away with the legendary Crescent Staff. Now, in this episode, we have two goals. One is to reach level 30, and two is to get as close as possible to the gold needed for our first mount. Now, we start off in Stone Mountain, our next questing zone. And it started out rather quietly, until it didn't. While I was clearing out some Ventricle loggers, a scummy little Alliance druid snuck up behind me and tried to jump me mid-fight. But what he didn't know is that your boy was just a sliver away from leveling up. So immediately upon killing the logger, with only a fraction of health left, I obtained and returned to full health and mana. This meant that the fight was now fair. So, what did the druid do like many Alliance do in this situation? He ran away. Now, I knew with the threat of being jumped by Alliance at any point, I had to return to Orgrimmar and immediately get my new level 20 abilities. We're at the Shaman Trainer, and as I gathered my new abilities, I noticed that I now had access to Frost Shock and Ghost Wolf, two abilities that surely would have helped me in that fight to chase down that running druid. So after leaving the trainer, I also noticed that I was rocking two world bows. I figured I was pretty clean. There weren't any wipes. Unfortunately, there weren't really any upgrades. We did finish the Deviant Hides, and we secured the 10-slot bag, which was going to be a massive upgrade to our character. Now, we're back in Stone. And it was pretty quick. After finishing the longer quest, I was pretty much underleveled for the next stretch of the quests that are available. So I decided to leave it behind for now and move on to another questing zone, the beautiful forest of Ashen Zone. And honestly, guys, this zone wasted no time in humbling me once again. These outrunners, they were relentless. They were constantly kicking me right before getting a heal off, jumping out of stealth at the least opportune moment. They were really just a slog to deal with. So mid-struggle, a passing mage must have noticed this and handed me a couple stacks of water. Completely unusable for my level, but the sentiment was greatly appreciated. So once finishing this quest, the truth was pretty obvious. In an attempt to get into some new scenery, I had obviously left the Barrens a little bit too early. I did, however, get an important quest for later that would reward us with a new pair of boots that we were probably going to use well into the 30s. But just as I was sitting there thinking about where should I quest next, should I go back to the Barrens? An invitation popped up for a dungeon. Not just any dungeon, but Shadowfang Keep. So it was time for us to cross into the Eastern Kingdom for the first time. We're trading the dust and the sun of Durakar for the fog and the rot of Silverwood. Now, I always loved the spending so much time in the Barrens and then heading over to the spooky Halloween feel of Silverpine and Tears Fall. I will say that Shadowfang Keep is incredibly deceptive. It starts out easy enough, then quietly ramps up, ending with enemies that were 8 levels higher than the first pool, which is badass for tanks and healers, but not so bad for me. I'm just there to deal some damage. Now the payoff can be huge though. This dungeon has some of the best low-level items money can buy. And at this point, I didn't really want the items to use. I kind of wanted them just to sell in the auction house for some mount money. And throughout the run, I did manage to grab a few upgrades. Nothing too crazy though. None of those expensive BOEs that I was hoping for. However, I will say, it's been an absolute blast having skinning as one of my professions because I do manage to make quite a bit of gold along the way. Eventually, all of the group's hard work culminated in the vicious final fight with the Dark Wizard, Arun, who is supposedly the father of all these werewolves. How he fathered them? Well, during the fight, the sick bastard must have convinced the tank that I tasted delicious. Because before anyone could react, she turned on me. Claws out, no hesitation. I went down, trying to buy the group time to recover. Pressure never let up. They did, however, hold it together. Thankfully, Aaron finally fell. Now, Beacons may have died that day on that castle floor, but the group walked away victorious. And I'll take that trade every time. After being resurrected, heading out the entrance, I immediately ran over to hand in Aragel's head to get our very first ring. A nice one at that. Now with Shadowfang behind me, I pushed into one of the most hostile zones in Azeroth, Hills Red Foothills. A place where low-level Horde are treated like target dummies for board level 60 Alliance. My experience pretty much matched the reputation. Not long after starting the quest, a mage and a paladin jumped me and killed me in cold blood. And if that wasn't enough, I had to witness one of the filthiest things I've ever seen the Alliance do. And I literally just came from a dungeon that involved a dude banging me. After resurrecting, making my way back, and getting a little revenge on some Alliance farmhands and soldiers, we were now level 24, and I figured I'd better finish a quest that I have been putting off for quite some time now. It was time to face a journey every shaman in Classic WoW remembers, earning your first water. Now the quest starts out very simple. A sage outside Ratchet sends you to speak with a dwarf atop the mountain in the Baron area. Arriving, this orc will send you down on a little mission because apparently she's too important to walk down and fetch her own water from the puddle below. And once back with her precious water, she then sent me right back to those first lands of Hillsbrand we had just left. Thank God I had remembered to grab the place. After returning to the Eastern Kingdoms once again and reaching Terran Mill, I gathered her oh-so-precious water that she demanded, and returned, only to be told that that wasn't even good enough. Next stop, Ashenvale. I took a brief pause from being an errand boy, and I decided somewhere along the way that I wanted to finish the Warzone questline from earlier and secure those boots I was talking about. After finishing up this little back and forth questline, which really just involves going to Booty Bay, grabbing some saw blades, and going to the auction house and buying a gun, we got our boots. With that out of the way, I figured it was time to get back to being an errand boy. Now, after fighting through droves of hostile elementals and collecting what I had thought and hoped was the final sample, I returned to Ratchet, only to be told I needed approval from the water spirits themselves that were somewhere secluded off the coast of Silverpine. So, once again, we're back in the Eastern Kingdoms. I was questioning, why couldn't I have just stopped in there and said hi to these guys, see if I passed their little vibe check while I was already over there. So once again, we crossed that damn sea. Upon arriving, I dealt with the lesser elementals. I spoke to their leader, who finally ended this circus. We were now back in Ratchet, and we were rewarded with the more than well-earned water totem. Now at this point, we were already now level 25 and had achieved 3 of our 4 goals. I'm not gonna lie, guys, it's feeling pretty good. That same feeling follows me to the coast of Ashenvale, where the ocean swallowed the land and the black fathom deeps waited below. Now these caverns were damp and they were dim, and they were filled with echoes of things that were fairly scary. Early on, Luke did smile upon us. Blue offhand dropped immediately off the first Murloc that we killed. Unfortunately, not very useful for us, but hopefully the party member that won it could get a little bit of some change off of it on the auction house. And as we pushed deeper, I couldn't help but think back to the season of Discovery and all of the fun we had there. As we moved deeper, we ran into the first boss, Gamoom Ra. Gamura, the giant angry creature. Now, he is much less challenging than his Sod Raid counterpart. He didn't really have much to offer in terms of a fight. The same could actually be said for the next 2 bosses, the Naga Witch Severus and the Murloc boss Galahad. Both turned out to be relatively tame in their fights and their loot drops. Thankfully, Severus did drop a nice bow upgrade for the hunter. Now, things do get a little bit more challenging, however, when we finally stumbled upon the evil warlock, Kelrus. His challenge is his ability to put multiple party members to sleep periodically. Now, this could spell disaster for your group if he had managed to put both, say, the tank and the healer to sleep at the same time. However, thankfully, not both of ours were put to sleep simultaneously, and we were able to put this warlock down. Now, upon looting him, he dropped his fairly sought-after staff. Now, I will say, while technically this staff would have been a tiny bit of an upgrade for us in the DPS category, I then found out that the healer actually needed it, so I decided to just pass on it because this was probably going to carry him well into the Scarlet Monastery. This meant that only one boss remained in the dungeon, the Vile Serpent, Akumai. Now, I think it's important to note that at this point, we've been running with essentially a healer druid that is masqueraded as a tank, and it's been very apparent as I've been pulling Brett 75% of the time on all bosses and mobs. Now, unfortunately, this happened again on Akumai, but it was during his enraged phase. So, as you can probably imagine, this spelled another death for Beefmuns at the hand of a dungeon's final boss. I mean, at this point, we're starting to bat 1,000 on dying to the final boss of every dungeon we do. Now, thankfully, once again, the group was able to persevere, and it culminated in another dungeon success. Now, at this point in our journey, we were just a sliver away from level 27, and it was time to enter one of the caves that gave me such a hard time on my warrior, and one you probably couldn't pay me to enter on a hardcore character, the Thistlebird Hole. Now, these teddy bears may seem cute and cuddly, but they have a very nasty enrage mechanic, along with hitting attack numbers that respawn very quickly. And I'm not gonna lie to you guys, even though I had these guys out-leveled by 3 to 4 levels at this point, I knew this wasn't going to be a cakewalk, even on my shaman. Eventually, after fighting my way into the inner depths, I was looking towards gathering the troll charms for the quest that sent me. Now, just as I deemed level 27, I ran into this hunter, Jazz Pepsi, and decided to group up. And we started to run an absolute train on these poor misunderstood teddy bears. Eventually, after gathering the remainder of the troll charms for both of us, and killing the remaining numbers, we fought deeper into the cave and started the escort quest. Now, this escort quest is a little bit different than any of my other experience. This druid basically said, screw you guys, I'm out of here. And he left us to fight the teddy bears by ourselves. Which at one point, I swear there was like 10 of these guys. There is absolutely no way I could have survived this quest by myself. Eventually, we fought hard and we vanquished these ravenous creatures. And we made our way back to Splinter Tree Coast. We even managed to kill Sharp Talon along the way for a nice little bonus quest experience. So this meant just a short amount of time. We were already halfway to 28, and it was time for one of my favorite questing zones, the Thousand Needles. Taking the iconic elevator down and arriving at Freeman Post really has always cemented in my head that you're getting closer to the mid-game of Class WoW. We were then dispatched in the first segments of the zone quest, taking down what felt like hundreds of my race's sworn enemies, the Centaur. Now, one thing up to this point that has been on my mind for a while was trying to get away from using two-handed weapons. Because I'll be honest, I basically did that for over 100 hours on my warrior class WoW journey. And the aesthetic of using one-handed has always been my personal favorite, and something that really drove me to choosing the shaman in the first place. So I did a little bit of research, and it turns out shaman leveling is definitely viable with a fast one-hand and a shield combination. Now, not only is it quicker, but your survivability jumps through the roof. So joining up with another BFD, the chance at a new blue dagger is basically a no-brainer. And just like before, we made our way through the depths. This time, I did not die in Akumai, and I convinced the group to join me in the attempt to kill this hidden dino that drops the dagger. And if I had not looked this up, I would have had no idea this little guy was hiding below the temple now. Of course, as is the case, it feels like whenever I go out and intentionally target an upgrade, it did not drop. However, I will say this, when it comes to these things, I would rather the item I'm searching for not drop at all than for it to drop and then lose it in a roll. So, what's a broken-hearted boy to do when he heads home without his drops he's searching for? I'll tell you, you immediately head to the auction house and angrily spend your mount gold on whatever you can get. So, after buying a new shield and a new dagger, and doing some much-needed character maintenance, it was time to fly back to the flight path near Black Fathom Death, hand in our completed quest from the dungeon, and start training our dagger skills. Now that is when all hell broke loose. Now, I didn't think anything of it when I first watched this level 26 rogue kill this level 30 rogue. I just gave him a nice cheer, and I gave him a heal while he was giving himself a bite to eat to recover. 2 minutes later, it turns out that same level 30 that he had killed had called in some friends that somehow were nearby. What happened next was an all-out bloodbath between us and the Alliance. And I had to start gathering some numbers to even things out. And once things became more fair, things started to sway in our favor. And I have to say, nothing in this game is more satisfying than getting revenge against gankers and watching them run away after doing some, I'll admit, less than reputable actions and getting my fill of revenge. It was time to leave all of this chaos and negative energy behind us and head back to the Needles. And upon returning to the Needles, our task was to take out some wyverns and smash their eggs, which, I'm not gonna lie, I kind of felt a little weird as a Tauren who supposedly loved nature. Now, during this questionable mission, I joined up with this warlock in order to help escort this Tauren back to safety and throws and droves these angry wyvern attacks. As we fought along the route to Nail, we eventually arrived at a safe distance away from the nest when we said goodbye to the Tauren and the warlock. And I never really expected to see him again. That wasn't until half an hour later when we both randomly stumbled upon each other in order to take out this dangerous elite panther. Even with the two of us, the panther put up a hell of a fight. And I think this panther was foreshadowing us for the jungles that await us in the future. And it was a good thing that we both had met up, because honestly, I don't think I would have been able to take this cat down 1v1. After we said goodbye to the warlock and thanked him for his help with these quests, I was then lucky enough to run into this centaur messenger and get access to a little quest tournament. This meant that it was time for what is surely one of the scariest quests for someone who would be playing hardcore in Thousand Needles. The little quest, you might know, is called A Taste of Fate, which literally involves you basically jumping off your cliff in hopes of being saved at the last second. With these completed, it was time to hand in a good amount of quests. down to nothing, I figured it was time to head back to Stone Talon to quickly turn in and finish those quests that we had forgotten about and hit level 29. This was going to be the final level of this episode's challenge. This also granted us access to Razorfen Crawl, a dungeon filled with quite a good deal of experience and some really decent drops that could carry us well into the Scarlet Monastery. And after spending some time in the queue and joining up with a band of adventurers, we set out to rid the barons of this evil piggy infestation once and for all. And we fought through their vine-covered prisons, taking the fight straight to the end. Not even their mightiest champions were able to stop them. I even was able to snag a great pair of new pants from this pigzilla that is going to be with us for quite some time. Eventually, this all culminated into a fight with their leader, the evil, wicked crone, Charglaw. And although I will admit she is a mighty witch in her own right, her magical powers were not strong enough to save her. And upon her defeat, she let out an ominous warning of some supposed new allies that were going to avenge her clan's death. Only time could tell when this would be. Immediately after, however, we decided to complete the escort quest and get just a little bit more of extra experience out of the dungeon. Once this goblin that we had escorted had been successfully pulled through all the endless mobs of Quildor, we all decided to make some separate ways. This meant that our RFK was completed. We snagged a great new upgrade. We were now halfway through level 29. So, with the finish line right there on the horizon, I decided to head back into the Needles and finish up one of the last few remaining quests. Honestly, this is probably the hardest quest in the entire zone. You have to enter the Rogue Feather Den and slay the Harpy Queen. Just the fight to get halfway through this infested cave was a challenge in itself. I would not even have attempted this quest on my warrior until I had outleveled this by probably 4 to 5 levels. And the hard part hadn't even started. Right when those thoughts were creeping in my head about giving up and maybe moving on to another zone, the light shined through the tunnel in the form of this maid. And immediately, we both joined forces. And almost immediately, we shared the sentiment that I had been feeling all along. Together, we fought through the remainder of the cave until we found their hidden food cache. And I found it somewhat suspicious not to find Grenka here waiting for us. And it all became clear as I destroyed the food cache. And immediately, we could hear a stirring coming down the halls. This led to an all-out brawl between us and the remaining Harpy clan. And if it wasn't for each other, I don't know if either one of us would ever have make it out of this cave alive. And as the dust finally settled, the tides of the battle turned in our favor as Grenka and her ravenous lordlings were defeated. With this quest completed, it was time for us to say goodbye to my favorite questing zone and head into the Shimmering Flats. Along the way, we completed our goal of this episode of finally hitting level 30. Now, although we are numerically halfway to 60, this is where the real challenge is only just beginning. Now, with the first goal of the video out of the way, and it getting pretty late, I decided it's probably time to log off for the night. But not before I made my way down to Naris and grabbed the flight path. Also deciding to park myself inside of the inn because you really can't give up on that rested experience. We're also sitting at 135 gold for our mountain requirement, but things are about to get a lot easier in that regard because immediately following the release of this episode, Blizzard will be launching the TBC pre-patch. So that means this is effectively going to be our last video that we will have in true vanilla classic. I just wanted to say a huge thank you to everyone who's come along for the wild ride we've had this last year. Discovering and enjoying classic World of Warcraft together. And the love and the support that you've all shown me truly does mean the world to me. More than words can ever say. So as always, I'll leave you with this. I love you all, and this is Deadman, and I'll see you in the next video.
Guys, the Dark Wolf and I'm no warrior. Since last time, this journey took me 2 months. Will Beekmans be ready, or will he be left behind in vanilla? Our journey into the Outlands continues. Last time, we had just reached level 30. After making our way to the White Sands and Salt Flats, we logged off for the night. But I had no idea what was going to be in store for us when we returned. You see, in this episode, everything is about to change. The original classic World of Warcraft that we've all come to know and love is no longer the same. With the release of the TBC pre-patch, many things in WoW have been completely rewritten. You have a huge list of changes, all the way from major class balancing and overhauls to the entire experience requirements from level 1 to 60 being squished down dramatically. And of course, how could I forget the introduction of the Draenei and the Blood Elves? So obviously, we had to leave Beefmen behind to become Belfsmiths. Okay, I'm just kidding, but I'm pretty sure 92% of Night Slayer's population is now a Blood Elf. The list goes on and on of everything that's changed, but none as impactful to our specific journey as this. That's right, my friends. Shaman literally become World of Warcraft's coolest class. And if you don't agree with me, you can meet me in the comments and we can fight about it. So, in today's episode, we set out to achieve two major milestones on the Shaman. One, getting our first mount, and more importantly, reaching level 40 and becoming Azeroth's coolest class. At the time of this recording, we only had an hour before the pre-patch went live. So while dishing out some punishment to the creatures in the Salt Flats, I had an idea. I decided what better way to celebrate the pre-patch going live than to head to Orgrimmar and celebrate with the rest of the Horde. And I will say, I was not disappointed. I don't know if I've ever seen Orgrimmar this lively. What started out as just a mass gathering of people quickly dissolved into absolute chaos. I mean, can we get a few condolences in the comments for all of the FPS that I saw die here today? And just as things were really starting to ramp up into an absolute chaotic mayhem, everything faded to black. This meant we were now assigned with the hardest challenge World of Warcraft players have ever had to overcome. Not being able to play WoW for an entire day. Now, if we thought we had it bad, my heart truly goes out to the 3 interns over at Blizzard HQ that were held responsible for getting the pre-patch up and running. I can only imagine how many death threats these poor guys got over the server maintenance having to be extended a few more times. I will say though, seeing all the memes on the classic WoW subreddit, it was pretty hilarious. But after 30-something hours, we were back. So after logging on, I immediately headed over to Eversong Woods just to see the BL starting mode for myself. I assumed that there'd be, a couple people that wanted to make some Blood Elves. And well, let's just say I thought that Orgrimmar was chaos. This was on a whole nother level. I mean, if you were foolish enough to try and do the Starter Zone quest, you were going to be waiting in line for hours. After walking around and deciding that I had seen enough, it was time to get back to the shamming. Now, back on to Beefman's. It was time to enter the Ring Prison. And of course, I'm talking about the Scarlet Monastery. The amount of upgrades every class can get from all of the different wings is insane. And with each run taking roughly 30 minutes or less, you can get quite a bit of experience rather quickly. So it's likely that every character will run these dungeons multiple times. First up on our list was to try and tackle the Graveyard. And although the dungeon has more of a caster-focused loot table, it's still filled with plenty of chances at good BOEs and plenty of experience. Now, after finishing the first boss, we actually managed to snag a nice weapon upgrade in the form of a pair of brass knuckles. And I mean, what's cooler than punching people in the face as a giant man cow? After grabbing the upgrade, the group and I continued pushing deeper through the cemetery and ended up facing the final boss, Blood Mage Thalnos, who ended up dropping a nice set of shoulders and a necklace. And although the necklace was an upgrade and we tried, we unfortunately continued our bad luck and lost the roll. After things going so well in the graveyard, the group and I, we got a little cocky, and we tried the more difficult library. And although we tried, it turns out we weren't ready.
I'll say this one might be a little high still.
So with our first we decided to head over to Bloodwood Village and try and get our first mount. As I didn't really know exactly how much gold it was going to cost, I figured we would just wing it and find out. Now, once in the village, it wasn't until after getting the training that I found out that we were actually 6 gold shy of getting our Kodo. So unfortunately, Ghostwood form wasn't going to be retired just yet. After finishing up handing in some straggler quests all over Azeroth, we returned to the monastery to take down the library with a more appropriate level group. As an enhancement shaman, there also aren't many upgrades that come out of the library outside of completing some quests and good experience, and unlocking the Scarlet Key so that you can get access to the other 2 wings. Now, after fighting through the long halls that are filled with countless books of Scarlet knowledge, we had come face to face with the villainous mage, Dome. But to our surprise, he wasn't the only villainous mage here today. You see, halfway through the dungeon, our mage revealed his true evil nature by starting to roll need on literally everything he could get his grimy little undead hands on. Now this left me feeling incredibly scared before heading into the final boss. And after fighting and taking down the mage, whose real only mechanic is making sure you're out of the room before he incinerates it, my fears came true. You see, he dropped both his shoulders and his staff. These are amazing upgrades for casters that they will use well into the latter 30s or even early 40s, and our Warlock desperately needed them. So together, the stream chat and I clasp our virtual hands and we prayed for the Warlock.
Alright. I really hope she wins it. I really hope I do win. Yes, let's go. Okay.
And by the gods, our prayers were answered. The Warlock not just won the rolls, but both, and walked away with the upgrades, leaving the evil mage empty-handed. Justice had actually been served, so I was able to log off with peace of mind for the night, knowing that a ninja leader was defeated. Walking back in on the next day, you guessed it, we started off with another Scarlet Monastery run. I mean, you really can't pass up the experience this dungeon has. Could you imagine my surprise, though, when I saw a paladin was already the same level as us? I mean, I think this person literally had to have stayed up for 24 hours straight to get to this point. What a freaking gamer. Over the course of the next several hours, as a group, we crushed both the graveyard and the library quarters repeatedly. This is where I learned that having a pally tank is some of the easiest dungeon grinding you can ask for. I think they're literally just made for it. This brought us all the way up from level 32 to dang near halfway to 34. And along the way, the dungeon group finally brought us in enough gold to buy our first mount. We were now owners of a beautiful 2004 brown Kodo, basically brand new. The stable master even threw in an air freshener on the house. I had to go and test out the new 4-wheel drive.
I even get 50 here.